hearing my voice, don't go below the generator room. I know you're thinking about it. I know you're standing in front of the hatch. Whatever you do, don't open it. The voice crackled through the old radio like it had traveled across decades just to reach me. The worst part? It was my own voice. My name is Ryan Hale, and until last winter, I believed every mystery had a logical explanation. I was an electrical engineer from Seattle. I fixed communication towers, repaired emergency systems, and spent most of my career solving problems with wires and circuit boards. Ghost stories? Ancient curses? Haunted houses? I didn't believe in any of it. That changed on January 14th, 2019. It started with a phone call. The Alaska State Troopers informed me that my uncle, Thomas Hale, had been missing for almost 6 weeks. Nobody had contacted me sooner because they didn't know I existed. My uncle had lived alone on Gull's End Island, a lonely stretch of rock nearly 20 miles off Alaska's southern coast. He maintained an old lighthouse that had long since been automated, refusing to leave even after everyone else moved away. The trooper explained that the supply boat had arrived for its monthly delivery and found the lighthouse unlocked. The lights were still operating. The heater was running. Dinner sat untouched on the kitchen table. But Thomas was gone. No footprints. No blood. No signs of a struggle. It was as if he had simply vanished. Since I was his closest living relative, they asked me to collect his belongings and decide what to do with the property. I almost said no. My uncle and I hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years. He'd become obsessed with strange theories after retiring from the Coast Guard. Letters about impossible lights beneath the ocean. Voices carried by radio frequencies no one else could hear. He insisted the island hid something older than history itself. Eventually, the family stopped responding. We assumed loneliness had taken its toll. 3 days later, I boarded a weather-beaten fishing boat headed toward Gull's End. The captain barely spoke during the 4-hour journey. As the island appeared through the freezing fog, he finally broke the silence. You staying long? Just enough to clean the place out. He nodded without looking at me. They all say that. What do you mean? He tightened his grip on the wheel. The last 3 caretakers. I frowned. I thought my uncle lived there alone. He did. The captain hesitated. They all did. When we reached the dock, he unloaded my bags without another word. Before climbing back aboard, he called out one last warning. If the lighthouse starts making sounds after midnight. He paused. Pretend you don't hear them. Then he left. Within minutes, the boat disappeared into the fog. I was alone. The lighthouse stood atop a steep cliff overlooking the gray Pacific. It looked older than the photographs I'd seen. The white paint had peeled away in long strips, exposing weathered stone beneath. The wind howled through rusted railings, carrying the smell of salt and seaweed. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. A mug of cold coffee still rested beside an open notebook. The fireplace contained half-burned logs. A chessboard sat on a table with black halfway through a game. Someone had clearly expected to return. I spent the afternoon unpacking and cataloging my uncle's belongings. Most of the rooms were exactly what you'd expect from an old lighthouse keeper's home. Books, fishing equipment, weather journals, old Coast Guard photographs. Then I reached the basement. Unlike the rest of the lighthouse, it looked recently renovated. Fresh concrete covered the floor. Brand new electrical wiring lined the walls. Industrial LED lights illuminated a corridor that definitely hadn't existed on the original blueprints. I knew that because I'd found the building plans upstairs. According to them, the basement should have ended at the generator room. Instead, a narrow hallway stretched into darkness beneath the island. Someone had spent years digging it. I followed the corridor nearly 100 feet before reaching a massive steel blast door. No handle, no keypad, just a circular locking mechanism in the center. Scratched into the steel were 3 words. Don't go lower. I assumed my uncle had written them during one of his episodes. Still, the warning unsettled me. Nearby sat dozens of notebooks, stacked neatly inside waterproof containers. Every single one belonged to Thomas. The earliest entries described routine maintenance around the lighthouse. Weather reports, generator repairs, supply inventories. Then, over the years, his handwriting changed. It became shakier, more desperate. One sentence appeared over and over again. It isn't under the island. The island is above it. I laughed nervously. Classic Uncle Thomas. Then I noticed the dates. His final journal entry wasn't 6 weeks old. It had been written yesterday. I stared at the page for nearly a minute. Impossible. The police had searched the lighthouse weeks earlier. There was no way anyone could have entered without leaving footprints in the snow. Unless someone was still here. A loud metallic clang echoed somewhere beneath the floor. Not from outside. Not from the lighthouse. From below the steel door. I froze. The sound came again. 3 slow knocks. Clang, clang, clang. Then silence. I told myself it was the pipes expanding in the cold. Old buildings make strange noises. That's all. I turned toward the stairs. That's when every light in the basement shut off at once. Complete darkness swallowed the hallway. A second later, emergency backup lights flickered to life. Dim red bulbs cast long shadows across the concrete walls. At the far end of the corridor, the steel door was no longer closed. It stood open only a few inches, and from somewhere deep below, a faint radio signal crackled through the darkness. Someone was trying to speak. I don't know why I didn't run. Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave the basement, get back to the truck, and beg the captain to come back for me. Instead, I walked toward the open steel door. The air changed with every step. It became colder, not the kind of cold that stings your skin, but the kind that settles inside your lungs. Every breath felt heavy, almost metallic, like breathing inside an old machine. The narrow gap between the doors was just wide enough for me to squeeze through. Beyond it, the concrete hallway continued another 50 feet before opening into a massive underground chamber. I stopped in the doorway. What the hell? The room was enormous. It couldn't possibly fit beneath the lighthouse. Rows of old military equipment stretched into the darkness. Towering radio racks lined the walls, their vacuum tubes glowing faintly amber. Thick bundles of black cables disappeared into the ceiling, while rusted ventilation duct hummed somewhere overhead. In the center stood a long operations desk covered with maps of the Alaskan coastline. Most of the paper had yellowed with age. Some maps weren't maps at all. They showed circles, hundreds of them, scattered across the Pacific Ocean. Every circle was marked with the same symbol. A black triangle. No names. No coordinates. Just triangles. I reached for one of the documents. At the bottom was a faded government stamp. Property of North Pacific Listening Station 7. Decommissioned 1978. Listening station? No one had ever mentioned an underground military bunker beneath this island. My uncle had spent years restoring electrical systems down here. Now I understood why. This place still had power. A faint burst of static crackled through the room. One of the radios had come alive. I walked toward it. The display was ancient, barely functioning, but one small green light blinked steadily. A voice broke through the static. Mayday. Engine failure. Anyone receiving? The transmission was weak. Male. Middle-aged. Then another radio switched on. Visibility 0. Requesting immediate assistance. Another voice. Different person. Different accent. Within seconds, more radios awakened. One after another. Different voices. Different emergencies. Some whispered. Some screamed. Some cried for help. The room filled with overlapping broadcasts until it became impossible to understand any of them. Then, every radio went silent at once. A single speaker remained active. The voice was calm, steady. "Ryan." I froze. The speaker crackled again. "If you're hearing this, you've already opened the blast door." I stepped closer. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs. The voice continued. "You think you're inside an abandoned military bunker." A pause. "You're wrong." It laughed softly, not mocking, exhausted. "I know you're confused because I was confused too." Every hair on my arm stood upright. The voice sounded exactly like mine. Same tone, same pacing. Even a slight rasp I'd had since college. I checked the room instinctively. There had to be someone else here. Someone playing a recording. "You'll find my notebook under the operations table." My eyes drifted toward the desk. Something lay beneath it. A black leather journal. "You have about 30 minutes before they realize you're awake." My stomach tightened. They don't like surprises. The transmission ended. Static returned. I slowly crouched beside the desk and pulled out the notebook. The cover read, "Property of Ryan Hale." I stared at it. Someone had written my full name in silver ink. Impossible. I had never owned this notebook. My hand shook as I opened the first page. The handwriting was mine. Every letter, every curve, every mistake I usually made when writing quickly. The first sentence stopped my heart. "If you're reading this, then you've made the same mistake I did." I flipped ahead. Hundreds of pages. Every one written by someone who knew details only I should know. Stories from my childhood. My first apartment. The day my father died. The scar on my left knee from falling off my bike when I was 11. No one else knew all of that. Not even my uncle. I kept turning pages until one paragraph caught my attention. "The lighthouse isn't built over the bunker." The bunker wasn't built under the lighthouse. Neither of them were here first. Before I could read further, a loud metallic thud echoed somewhere beyond the chamber. Not behind me. Ahead, farther underground. Another thud, closer this time. Then another. Heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Each one sent a faint vibration through the concrete floor. Someone, or something, was walking toward the operations room. I switched off my flashlight. The chamber fell into near darkness. Only the dim glow of old radio tubes remained. The footsteps stopped. Silence. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then every radio in the room spoke together in perfect unison. "Don't let it see your face." At that exact moment, a shadow stretched across the far wall. It wasn't cast by a person. It was far too tall, and it was getting closer. This story about my wife. Every night, she heard someone counting outside our cabin. People ask why my wife and I sold our dream cabin after only 17 days. I usually tell them the plumbing froze, or that we couldn't handle the long winters in northern Idaho. It's easier than telling them the truth, because the truth sounds insane. My name is Mason Brooks, and until last October, I thought I'd finally escaped city life. After 15 years working as a paramedic in Spokane, my wife Emily and I bought a cabin overlooking a narrow valley near the Idaho-Montana border. There wasn't another house for miles. The nearest gas station was almost 40 minutes away. That's exactly what we wanted. Silence. Fresh air. A place where we could grow old together. The first few nights were perfect. Then Emily stopped sleeping. Every morning, she'd look exhausted. Someone was outside again. She'd whisper over breakfast. "Probably elk." I'd tell her. She'd slowly shake her head. They weren't walking. They were counting. I laughed. "Counting?" She nodded. 1, 2, 3, 4. She said the voice always sounded the same. Calm, emotionless, almost bored. Every night, it counted a little higher. The first night, it stopped at 12. The second night, it reached 27. The third night, 46. I told myself stress was getting to her. Moving into the wilderness can play tricks on people. That's what I believed, until I heard it myself. I woke just after 2 in the morning because Emily was gripping my arm so tightly it hurt. Without saying a word, she pointed toward the bedroom window. At first I heard only the wind moving through the pine trees. Then, 78, the voice came from outside. Soft, perfectly clear. 79. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't whispering. It sounded as if someone stood inches from the glass. 80. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. The porch was empty. Fresh snow covered the ground. No footprints. The counting stopped. I convinced myself someone had played a prank. The next morning, I searched every inch of the property. Nothing. No tracks. No signs anyone had been there. That afternoon, an elderly ranger stopped by to introduce himself. When I casually mentioned hearing someone outside, his expression changed. He asked me only one question. What number did it reach? I told him. 80. He stared at the mountains for several seconds before speaking. If it ever reaches 100. He looked directly at me. Don't answer the door. He refused to explain why. At the time, I thought he was just an old man telling local ghost stories. I wish I had listened.